Dr. Shiv Chopra is a world-renowned scientist. Originally from India, he lives in Canada and has done since 1960. His academic qualifications include graduation in veterinary medicine and a master's in science and PhD in microbiology. He is a recipient of numerous academic awards, including a fellowship of the World Health Organization. His career is checkered with various eminent posts in India, England, and Canada. He is also the recipient of numerous national and international awards for his work on human rights, science for the public good, and community service. Over the years, Dr. Chopra's name has become synonymous with global food security. Employed as a senior scientific advisor at the Canadian Ministry of Health from 1969 till 2004, he refused to approve various harmful drugs for food-producing animals. He endured disciplinary actions, spoke out publicly, testified at Senate committees, and won many federal court cases against the Government of Canada. His contributions on food and public health safety are featured in many internationally acclaimed documentaries. His book, Corrupt to the Core, Memoirs of a Health Canada Whistleblower, is a bestseller. It provides a bristling account of how corporate corruption endangers public safety. It also contains his famously illuminated 5 Pillars of Food Safety, which is a blueprint for the future establishment of global food security. I'd like to introduce Shiv Chopra.
This is my 3rd time that I'm touring BC in different ways. First was in 2005 in Vancouver, the islands, all over the place. The idea of 5 pillars of food safety was actually invented here in Comox when I was speaking to at a Sunday fest. People were eating food and they asked me to speak just on stage as though I was a musician. And so while talking there, suddenly I didn't know what I was going to say. People were having fun. And then it occurred to me, the answer is not with me. The answer is with people. If I tell them what's wrong with their food, they'll get mad and then they'll fix the problem. And unfortunately, that hasn't happened. Because that was then what those 5 materials that I'm going to talk about very quickly, it's all described up there in an article called 5 Pillars of Food Safety. Those 5 products, and those are now central to what we are talking about. I'm only going to restrict my comments about TPP, what it is. You've already been introduced, but I'll focus only on food sovereignty. Food sovereignty includes food security. It includes food safety. That's the whole part of food. And then it also includes health. So therefore it's TPP, food sovereignty, and our health. How is it affecting our health, and how will it affect our health in the future? Then we will lose our country altogether, our own personal sovereignty, our own personal security, and we have no future as a country, and no future for our children, grandchildren, and the future generations. That's how horrible this thing is. Let me just quickly say, much has been said in the introduction, what the ISDA says. There's a lot of acronyms, there's all kinds of terms, FTA, TIPP, TPP, this and that, which we don't understand. And the central subject in there is the agreement. Who is present? The word is partnership. Who are the partners? Who were in the negotiations? We heard that Canada has been there 6 years, and it was going on for much longer, and it's all secret. And who were present there? There were bankers, then there were pharmaceutical companies making these negotiations. what trade will go on, and they say it'll remain secret for the next 4 years. We won't even know what was discussed. We have no entitlement to know, and yet we are the people on whose backs all these trade agreements are being made. It's not, the word trade is not mentioned in any of this. The word partnership, and the other one is investment. So what they're talking about is investment to make their dirty money grow dirtier and more and more and more. That basically what this agreement is all about, and every trade agreement, incidentally, is all about that. We know already from history of the first trade agreement that we had, FTA, between Canada and the United States, and then later on expanded to include Mexico, and it became NAFTA. Under those trade agreements, now let me tell you what went under. We have and nobody wants to talk about it, nobody wants to recognize it, the public doesn't know anything about it, but we have illegal actions taking place in the hands of our government, our own government. I don't mean just Health Canada, it's all the way up to the Privy Council, because that's where the decisions are policy decisions have been made under the trade agreements. And what we have in food, there are 5 materials in our food supply. They all toxic materials. They are hormones, they are antibiotics, slaughterhouse waste being fed back to food-producing animals, then there are genetically modified organisms, then there are pesticides and herbicides. These 5 materials, let me just very quickly review for you what they do. Hormones are, I'm not yet talking about RBGH. These are RBGH we had stopped and it's about to come back to us. I'll come back to that. There are hormones which are given to food-producing animals, in this case beef, for example, and the large packet of hormones is implanted under the skin behind the ear of the cow with this loose skin, and then that packet of hormones is left there for the life of the animal to the day of slaughter. On the day of the slaughter, the ear is cut off. And then that ear, together with the hormones packet, is boiled up. And then gelatin is made out of it, and that gelatin goes in your yogurt, in your ice cream, in soft candy, and the grandmothers are distributing it. Candy to children. And what does they do? We talk about reproductive disorders in children nowadays, and those are, where are they coming from? Those are sex hormones. They're like a large, birth control pill. 7 or 8 different hormones are there, and they are also the reason for causing cancer. We have determined, other jurisdictions, for example, the European Union has determined, led by Denmark, that those hormones can induce a new cancer and they can promote an existing cancer. Because of that, they call them complete carcinogens. So let's put aside the hormones. The second material that's being fed and injected in very, very large amounts in food-producing animals to cows and to pigs and chickens and so forth are antibiotics. Not one kind, but many kinds. And here the issue is not residues. Here the issue is that because those antibiotics are in the food supply all the time, and our factory farming operations now have 10,000 pigs in one place, 25,000 cattle in one place, and 100,000 chickens in another place, and this goes on, and all those antibiotics are daily being excreted by these animals, and then they come down with the rain, and then they flow down into the rivers, and they actually are found in flowing rivers. Just imagine antibiotics being found in flowing rivers. Just imagine the amount of antibiotics that are being utilized. Third item, Slaughterhouse waste. The slaughterhouse waste, when you slaughter an animal, only half the animal is meat, the rest is waste. And that waste part, which is blood, bones, horns, internal organs, hooves, hair, feathers, all that is collected. And also the excreta is picked up from the floor as well. And then onto that is added all animals that die in kennels, in laboratories, or die on the road, squirrels, whatever animals that are, can be found anywhere dead, they're also collected. And all of this material is collected and sent to what are called rendering plants. Rendering plants is where these materials are boiled and then dried up into powder, and then they're fed back to all food-producing animals, including dairy cows. Now imagine, other than doing harm to health, which is in a moment I'm going to speak about what it does, is if you're Jewish, if you're a Muslim and you don't eat pork, that pork is being fed to the cow, and now you're eating beef and the pork has been fed to your cow. If you're vegetarian, the same stuff has been fed to the dairy cow. Now that substance is coming in the milk. So all your ethics, your religions, everything is destroyed. It's all put aside for the sake of because we can't get rid of this garbage, and that garbage is being fed back. But that garbage has much more serious consequences. The consequence in this case is that we discovered, as this practice started in Europe, particularly in Britain, then it caused mad cow disease, called bovine spongiform disease. And the bovine spongiform disease is called bovine BSE because it makes the brain go like sponge. It's a natural disease. It's not even caused by an infection. It's a protein from primordial times, and then it gets, if you keep on concentrating, feeding it back, it gets concentrated, and then the cows, more and more cows develop it. And the incubation period, that is the time from it starts to the time it manifests, it takes 6 to 8 years in the cow. Now, if that same meat or beef is eaten by people, it takes about 25 years in people to manifest. So that if old people eat that beef and it's not going to manifest, they're going to die of something else. But if you feed that beef to the baby as beef paste, now imagine what's going to happen. That in 25 years later, it can manifest. All the people who have died from CJD up to now are under the age of 40. Now just shows you that's where the disease is occurring. And every now and then we read in the newspaper, oh, another mad cow was found. And you hear from CFIA, Canadian Food Inspection Agency, don't worry about it. That cow didn't go into the food production, but they don't tell you what are going in, that they didn't detect, because they're not testing the cows. They're not doing anything. They're not stopping to feed this material to animals. So there is the third item. Fourth item I talked about is genetically modified organisms. Genetically modified organisms are unnatural transference of genes from one species to another, which is not permitted in nature. It cannot happen in nature. You can make a hybrid. For example, you take a horse and a donkey and you mate them and you get a mule. But mule cannot produce another mule, it cannot produce another donkey, it cannot produce another horse, and it's a sterile animal. It looks like horse and a donkey, it's even hardier than them, but then mule is mule and it finishes. What we're doing with genetically modified organisms is that you take a gene of a bacteria and you put in a tomato or on a plant, or you can do the other way. You can take the gene of a cow or a human, you put it in the bacteria, and the bacteria thinks it's cow, and it produces the bovine growth hormone or human insulin. And those are the materials that are now in genetically modified organisms. And so when you do this, this is unnatural behavior. Unnatural thing it simply cannot happen. But we are. The fifth item that is attached to these GMOs, the GMOs actually cannot grow. They're weak cells, weak seeds in nature. They cannot compete against natural seeds. So they're given extra advantage by making them tolerant to some herbicides and pesticides, like glyphosate or Roundup, as you often. Roundup is worse than glyphosate because it's a mixture of something else in it. So what does that do? They've taken the gene of from a soil bacteria and they injected into the plants whatever, it could be soybean, it could be canola, it could be corn or whatever, and then they make it tolerant to this herbicide called Roundup, and then you grow your seed under the cover of that herbicide. And once that happens, now you're giving advantage to this seed to grow, but if you leave it alone, it can't compete. So that's what happens to the GMOs and the pesticide along with. What has happened with the pesticides, or herbicide in this case, over time they lose their power. They no longer, the GMO can't even be, then the other plants and weeds still come up. In fact, super weeds come up, and then they say, we can't, that's not good enough, so therefore let's add another, bring back the 2,4-D. Or let's add atrazine, a whole bunch of, stack them up, and they call them smart stacks. In other words, whole stack of pesticides. And pesticides have two functions, two ways they work. One is they act like hormones, and so therefore you are now inducing, and children, and so therefore they're causing immune disorders and reproductive disorders and all kinds of things those pesticides are doing. And the second way they act, that they're neurotoxic. That's how they kill insects and so forth. And so those neurotoxins are coming into people as well, so therefore we develop neurological diseases, Parkinson's or dementia and those kinds of things. Why I'm saying this? It's not a make-up thing, but there's no direct proof that if you eat it today and tomorrow you're going to develop this disease. And in fact, these companies are saying, look, millions of people are eating it, nothing is happening to them. That's a lie, because such a toxicity takes a long time to manifest. Cancer doesn't happen in one day, and these neurological and other diseases and reproductive disorders, they don't happen in one day. But what has happened, that nobody can deny, when you look back in 15 years or so, that whole bunch of diseases have increased, are increasing in children population. That where is the heart problems or reproductive disorders or allergies, obesity, diabetes in children? Why is it increasing? They say 80% of the children will become diabetic. And why wasn't it there before, 50 years ago? Where has it come from? So if this is happening, it should be the responsibility of our authorities, Health Canada, and indeed the companies. I'm going to come back to the companies themselves in a second. Why won't they say that this is happening? Let's take a look at that. Maybe we made a mistake. Maybe we were wrong in predicting nothing would happen, because that's what they said. Approve now, and we'll see what happens in 15, 20 years. But 15, 20 years have now passed, and we have this set of data showing these diseases have increased. It's time to reflect and see why. Is it possible that it has come from there? And many scientists say that's the case, autism, etc. In our country, and indeed in every country, but we're talking about Canada, we have a law called the Food and Drugs Act. It's more than 100 years old. It took us a long time to develop that. And then that basically says anything that is sold to be consumed by people directly or indirectly must be tested by the company that wants to sell it by prescribed set of tests and experiments and bring those results to Health Canada or the US FDA or both, and each one. And then they will look at those results, not do their any own testing. We don't test anything. We just say, give us the results that you have produced and we'll take it in trust, but we'll appoint our own scientists to evaluate or audit your data and see, do our opinions match with yours or not. And then negotiations are made, what can be approved, what cannot be approved, what precautions to give, what warnings to give. None of that has been happening. Why? Because once NAFTA came into place, and FTA came into place, and then NAFTA, under those conditions, trade negotiations, they were saying deregulate. When did deregulation actually begin was the same time as NAFTA and these things were negotiated. And then saying that United States are largest trading partner, so we have to match our regulations with them. And if they deregulate, then we have to deregulate. In other words, don't apply the Food and Drugs Act. It started from Reagan, Mulroney, and Thatcher era. And now it has gone that slippery slope to the point where we meet our illustrious last Prime Minister. The most secret man, and happily he's gone. People are joking about his disappearance. Where did he go? He's not speaking. He's not seen. I think he's wearing a niqab. He thinks he can't be seen, but we know what he did. All secret negotiations. And one of the things he negotiated, and fortunately slipped through for our benefit, because the Americans wanted 10% of our milk market. Harper gave away 3.75%. saying maybe we can sell more eggs or pork or this thing, but then milk. And they knew that RBGH is not approved in Canada. They knew the only country among the 12 where it is approved is the United States. And they want to bring that milk into Canada. Whether it's 3% or 10%, and they knew that the farmers, dairy farmers, would complain about it and they would invoke the previous decision by Health Canada that this product is not allowed in Canada. What did Harper do? He said, I will offer you compensation if you lose your business up to $4.6 billion. Whose money did he commit?
Ours.
It wasn't in the budget. It is still not in the budget. I'm going to come back to this for a moment, to the current government. Because now, I think this is an opportunity. The reason I agreed to come back here is because of TPP. I feel this is an opportunity for the public to do something. In all previous tours and so on, people come and listen to me and then they applaud and call me a hero and go home and sleep. I said, I'm not interested in that anymore. I've had enough. I'm too old, 82 years old, I can't carry on. And it's not having an effect. Unless people get involved and say that they want to do something. And even if they say, yes, we want to do something, but they don't know what to do. They want to be guided. They want to have a peg where they say, okay, we can do this thing. So we had to devise something. We have petitions which you can sign, which you have been signing. You can take home and send more of those. That's one action you can take immediately. The 5 pillars of food safety that I described, there's the article there. You can take that home and distribute and discuss. The same thing is also on the DVD where the book is. You can take that, download or distribute or whatever. And then there's a bag that we created. An artist, without meeting me, she's put that into a cartoon shape, so 5 pillars of food safety are all given there. So you know what to do. Just take this grocery bag wherever you go and say, what's this? Oh, these things should not be there. Loblaws, will you make sure that these things that are not there? So in other words, it becomes a talking point. These are instruments of communication with each other. Those people who couldn't be here, but take it, talk to them, wherever you meet them. The next thing, the current government. The current government, I think it's an opportunity. At least we have to give them the benefit of the doubt based on what we have seen so far. The Liberal government, and so far it seems that the new Prime Minister, at least, is doing the right thing in terms of appointing people as ministers equitably, whether it's women or visible minorities or disabled people, wherever you meet the ministers and then you realize, oh, they made a selection based on that. That is true Canada. And he described that in one sentence when people said, are these people competent or not, as though previous ones were. And and his answer was simple, because it's 2016, end of matter. Tell me why, at least test these people whether they are competent or not. The competence of a politician is not that the politician brings the competence inherently, because after all, they're politicians. They can be completely uneducated. They can be without any education. They don't have to be expert. They are the representatives of the people. They're supposed to represent opinions like these and say, we're discussing with you, we'll take it back to Parliament and we'll either make new legislation or de-legislation or whatever. That's what the politician is supposed to do. But that's not what they do. When they become government, then they don't want to talk to people. Or they do things that people don't want to do. Or they don't consult with people. And people think they're power. But we are paying them. They are our employees. We have a contract with, every time we vote, we have a contract. Because they have already made promises while seeking vote. I will do this, I will do this, I will do this. Except at that time we didn't know what we were asking. And now I'm telling you, there are 5 materials which are illegally approved, and they are in our food supply. Therefore, our food supply is the worst, is the most toxic on earth. Because 4 of those materials are already banned in Europe. Hormones, antibiotics, slaughterhouse waste, and GMOs. They still have pesticides, and they're working on them to reduce or eliminate them altogether. So therefore, the European Union is ahead of us. And when you come to the trade agreement, here is what is required. And people don't know that. And government is not telling you that. No trade agreement can override safety standards. No trade agreement. It's in every trade agreement, stated and implicit, but nobody is challenging them. The European Union, actually led by only Denmark, took that stand and they won their way. Now, the European Union will not import our food, but we cannot stop their food coming into our country. How is that going to increase our jobs and trade? They don't want our stuff because it's toxic, and we can't deny it. And they say, we will buy it provided you give us a certificate and hormones and this and that is not used. then we have the right to come and audit, and Canada and the United States, okay. So therefore, some farmers will be able to sell food if they show that certification, but we cannot stop theirs, and so therefore, let's say 5% more cheese will come from there. We can't sell any meat or milk products to the European Union. So we're not gaining anything at all. We're actually losing. And they're calling it win-win situation. I think it's win-win only for the Europeans, not for us. So how did we gain in this area? We don't have to speculate into the future, such and such will happen, so and so will sue us. I'm saying, in fact, when they pay out, whose money are they paying out? How did they make these arrangements? To them, it doesn't matter. It's taxpayers' money. They increase their own salaries, they increase their own investments, and they increase the investments of the bankers and these corporations, and it's actually coming out of the people's pocket. And also at the cost of their own health and the future. So what needs to happen? What needs to happen, and that's what the petition states. Every government website in relation to TPP is saying food safety standards have never been compromised. That's a lie. And they will not be compromised. We will do the utmost to hold our safety standards. But we state that's untrue. For example, these 5 are there. And RBGH, that was actually now disallowed in this country. Now milk will come from the US. With that, all our milk will get contaminated. Whether it's based on 3% or 10% doesn't really matter. Once it's contaminated, we're finished. So therefore, we now have to demand from the health minister should implement the Act of Parliament that all these materials have to be shown to be safe and immediately stop this practice of using these 5 materials because they're illegally approved. They haven't received any safety test. They haven't, to make it very specific, hormones, anything which is given to food producing animals, you have to test the residue left in the meat or milk. The company, along with the government's inspection, have to test the amount of residue left in that food and acceptable daily intake in every human being for the rest of their life without causing any health risk. So, for example, if you're giving hormone, you determine how much residue is left, and that residue is determined, and this much hormone we can safely consume on a daily basis for the rest of our life. And then that maximum residue limit, called MRL, has to be published in Canada Gazette, which is publicly available. You go to the Canada Gazette and you don't find hormones listed there. That's an evidence, fundamental evidence, fundamental proof of government breaking its law and actually lying to the public that it's safe, and when they know they cannot determine the maximum residue limit of something that causes cancer because a single molecule attached to a single cell in the body can start a cancer. So therefore you cannot possibly determine a consumable residue limit that causes cancer. So therefore that material cannot be used, will not be, should never be allowed. Anything that causes cancer, you have to determine the maximum residue limit and show in the animals it doesn't. And so in this case, we have a concrete case. If now we have a prime minister, we have ministers, and we're getting double talk. The prime minister has done good things on the surface in appointing ministers. We have a trade minister. The trade minister, in this case, is going to shepherd TPP. It's already been signed by the new government in New Zealand, but it still has to be ratified. It cannot be approved until it's ratified in Parliament and provincial legislatures. And therefore, to ratify, they're holding some public consultations. And they're saying you can apply, you can send your comments, written comments, or you can apply to appear in person. I applied. I don't want to send documents because I don't know what they'll do with it. If they throw it away, I have no control over it. So I thought I would apply, and I wrote in there specifically that I want to only talk about food safety, only food issues. Nothing else. I'm not going to talk about cars or anything like that, just that. And I received a reply back a few days ago, and the reply was, thank you for writing. We'll let you know if you're invited, but we won't let you know if you're not invited. In other words, if you don't hear from us, that's the end of it. And we're not going to communicate with you anymore. So then, what kind of hearing, what kind of invitation is that? And so, interestingly, there is a individual parliamentary secretary. His name is Mr. Lametti. He's the person who is holding these public meetings. And he went to somewhere in Halifax a couple of weeks ago, and he collected 15 or 20 people, and then that was supposed to be public consultation. There was no media report, there was no invitations, and Council of Canadians said, what kind of consultation is this? You didn't even give us a notice. We wanted to appear, we wanted to hear. And he simply said, well, you know, we are very busy people, we have to run Parliament and so on. We can't always do this. And so this matter came out in the media, and mainstream media doesn't report these things anymore. Mr. Roberts is right. That's mainstream media is now gone off. They also have become stooges, generally speaking, of the same corporations because there's so much pressure. They're all together in this. These corporate people are completely on one side. I can answer that as an example in the later discussion about CBC, for example. Anyway, so when I get back from here on the 27th of April, I'm supposed to go to a town hall meeting in Guelph. This is a very different kind of town hall meeting. They have invited three people to be in that, and it's a kind of a debate or panel. The panel is composed of three people. One is an expert lawyer, one a person who has studied the trade laws and written books about it, and me. So we are each given 10 minutes to say our piece. Then we are given 2 minutes each to answer a question, and then there's discussion and so forth. Well, Mr. Lametti found out about it, so he insisted he be invited too. So, and the organizers, without even asking us, said, okay, go ahead. When I heard about it, I said, great, now we'll go, we'll have an opportunity, at least I will be able to ask him, are you going to invite me back too? Because we've invited you, and we're going to discuss that here. It's only fair that you invite me back. And I don't want you invite me just by yourself. I want to be invited where there's public, a town hall like this, so that we debate this in front of everybody, preferably inside a parliament. There should be a parliamentary hearing. The whole parliament should hear this debate. And there should be public present in the galleries. That is called public consultation. So we'll see what happens. So we're getting mixed messages. So I think why I'm here, what makes me very happy to be with you all, is because it's an opportunity for us to take action step by step by step. There's a possibility we're writing a petition. If that doesn't work, eventually we could even bring legal action against the government of Canada for not implementing the Food and Drugs Act. That gives you that opportunity. It's a very simple thing. There's an authority given by Parliament to a minister of the Crown, and then if they don't implement what the Parliament ordered them on behalf of the public of citizens of Canada, if they don't, then they're responsible, then a judiciary is supposed to rule on that matter. Then we'll see what happens. Mark this point, that the Food and Drugs Act is attached to the Criminal Code of Canada. Anybody who lies, it could be a government official, it could be a company, it could be a minister, it could be whoever. If they lie, if they falsify, they can be prosecuted and sent to jail. So it is as serious as that. This clause is provided in every trade agreement, fortunately. So we have the opportunity to challenge that, which is what the European Union did and won their way. We are probably, not probably, I'm certain, Canada is the most precious country on earth. We don't need trade of food. We shouldn't want to be trading food. We should want to be able to grow and feed our population ourselves the best and safest food possible. We have the capacity, we have the land, we have the water, we have the minerals, we have the population. Any extra of the best food that we produce, the safest food we produce, then we can talk about exporting it, and we'll get premium price, and we will create jobs and not lose jobs as we are going to. So there is this great potential, and I think the way kind of Prime Minister we have, if he opens his ears, if he wants to hear us, then we are able to communicate in simple terms. If that doesn't happen, then instead of, or in addition to the government holding public consultations, we should hold our consultations against the government, the public, and send those materials back to the Prime Minister. This is what the public says, Mr. Prime Minister. Do you want to hear or not? Thank you.